One person that was important in also highlighting that human toll of the close to 20 years of government of the Evo Morales uh, uh, mass party was Jhanisse Vaca. Jhanisse, you gave that speech in front of the OAS General Assembly after the OAS certified the electoral fraud and Evo Morales exiled himself in Mexico. The opposition won the last election, the Democratic opposition. There was trust that whether Rodrigo Paz won the election or Tuto Quiroga won the election, we would have a Democrat in power, hopefully for at least 5 years. What's happening?
Thank you, Javier. Let me start by saying that my heart is very heavy this morning, and I think you can feel it in my voice. Last night, while we were having dinner in Oslo and while we were closing the day for the conference, a 12-year-old named Miriam Ramirez, a kid from the area of Oruro in Bolivia, who was undergoing cancer treatment, passed away because the ambulance that was taking her to the hospital where she was to receive chemotherapy was not allowed to pass by the violent blockades that are currently taking over 90 points in my country. And I want to start by saying this because I want to be fair and I want to bring the truth of what is truly happening in Bolivia. I believe the international coverage is missing a lot of important points. We had a president elected last year by a Democratic majority. I was part of the independent exercise of parallel vote count to see that the results were truthful. So I can say from the work of 60,000 volunteers across the country that Rodrigo Paz, whether we like him or not, whether we voted for him or not, won the elections. And I would even like to highlight this because in a country that has been undergoing an erosion of democracy for so much time, to me it is outstanding that the Bolivian people had such a big democratic heart to pick someone who was not on the extreme left or on the extreme right, but is actually a centrist. This man has been in power for 6 months. He has been trying to do the right things, if you wish, in order to bring our country back towards democracy because he received a state that has been eroded for the past 20 years and that I'm sure we can all understand is undergoing a terrible crisis, economically speaking, but also institutionally speaking. And what happened is a couple months ago, it's been 34 days today, protests began against the current government, demanding things that initially were indeed legitimate and necessary. There were different groups mobilizing, rural teachers, and also groups of indigenous people that were demanding things that have been denied to them for 20 years. And the government was slow but smart to respond, and in time, they conceded to these demands. But there was also a group, which is the one that is holding my country hostage right now, that is executing violent protests throughout the country. And this doesn't only look like violently attacking the police or other groups. It looks like a siege. The city of La Paz is currently surrounded by blockades. And I cannot explain to you the desperation that one feels when people that you work with and you love cannot find food, cannot find medicine, the hospitals cannot get oxygen because these violent groups do not allow ambulances to pass, they don't let firefighters pass, they're not even letting groups that are rescuing animals. I've been part this past couple of days of trying to get a baby jaguar that has over 90 bullets in its body to a veterinary center to get the surgery that that jaguar needs. None of this elements that are humanitarian are being allowed to pass by these violent blockades that are demanding the resignation of the president of Bolivia. And I also want to be very clear because this is something that has been documented and proven by the government of Bolivia and even independent media. These groups are operating with money from drug trafficking. So while the international community thinks that this is a wave of protests of legitimate requests from the Bolivian people, what is actually happening is that my people are being held hostage. And this is not even being acknowledged. And something very important to realize is what is the hand behind this, because this is drug trafficking. Esto es narcotráfico that is keeping my country under siege. And the person behind this is Evo Morales, someone that you probably heard about. But what the international media has forgotten to cover, and this has really been angering for Bolivians at home, is that the violent blockades demanding the resignation of President Paz began the same week that former President Evo Morales had an arrest warrant released against him because of his trafficking of a 15-year-old that he got pregnant while he was president. And this is not the only case of pedophilia that has been exposed internationally. And let me tell you, talking about that here is very dangerous for me and for anyone who dares to talk about this, because immediately you get threats for talking about Evo Morales pedophilia. But because that case has reached the courts and there is an arrest warrant against him, that exact same week he called on his bases to continue the road blockades, to not accept anything but the resignation of President Paz, and to hold the Bolivian people hostage.
It really is a case of a very small minority taking a country hostage. I mean, the numbers are in the latest election, where you very correctly pointed out the overwhelming vote, over 80%, went to either of the two candidates that eventually went on the runoff election. And Evo Morales is strong in specific strongholds, but they have clearly a powerful ability to stop the country, to block the country, and to kind of put the government on its knees. What's the actual situation right now? I've been getting texts of people worried.
Look, as a pro-democracy and nonviolent activist, I think that even minorities have the right to protest. But it's
100%.
one thing to protest peacefully, it's another one to blockade ambulances, to not let oxygen get to hospitals. President Paz and his government has responded understanding that what these violent groups are seeking is a massacre. They want to see police repression. This is how Morales operates. This is how he got into power when he did in 2006. And what he is seeking is the death of his own people, so that by this he can justify an even more violent uprising to oust President Paz. President Paz has said that he is a democratic president. He is not going to play that game. He is not going to repress. So up until today, there has been no state of siege, even though a lot of people are asking for a state of exception so that finally food and medicine can get to hospitals and to the people. And he has only offered dialogue. And to be fully fair, Javier, this is also angering people on the pro-democracy and in general civil society, because Bolivians want to live. We want to work.
Peace.
And we cannot do this because we're being roadblocked and held hostages by violent groups. And it's the government's responsibility to guarantee our right to food, our right to medicine, our right to work. It's been 9 people that have died because of this up until now. And President Paz continues to respond that he's only going to do that, to go to dialogue, and he's not going to fall into a repression. And here is where I really want to ask, especially journalists in the room, when you talk about my country, please be fair. If any other president in any of your countries have raped a 15-year-old and gotten her pregnant, and is calling for violent protests the same week that he's about to be arrested, that would be the headline. That would be the truth that would be spoken about. It is unbelievable. It is unbelievable to me that journalists that have
smart journalists, educated in the best universities of the West, of Europe, of the United States,
completely missing this point. And I also want to highlight the bravery, the strength, and the resilience of Bolivian people that once more are living under the complete doubt of what our future will be, that cannot find food. I want to give an acknowledgement to some of my colleagues that have been texting me. They haven't eaten in 2 days because they can't find meat in La Paz. And I want to call on all of you, we need to understand that we have been talking about what dictatorships do when they're in power. Once they lose power, once a democratic government wins and we reach a transition, I hope this is not the future for my colleagues, but this is something that has happened in other countries as well. They use the paramilitary groups, the drug trafficking networks, the violent groups that they had in order to destabilize the democratic government. And it's our responsibility for the Bolivian people, for the region, for the future of democracy, to be fair, to support this democratic government, to work with groups like the Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders. I call you, please reach out to me. Let's do the work that you do in other countries, in my country that is under siege, and let's be fair on the way that we talk about this. We are working to support the Bolivian government. We hope to be able to build a group of strategic advisors. We know that you have a lot of experience dealing with this type of conflicts, and I really hope that it can be understood that Bolivia is also the generator of cocaine. The groups that are defending Morales right now are protecting the production of cocaine that then goes to Venezuela, Nicaragua, etc. And we need to be able to protect the region by protecting this transitional government.
And about the fairness and the seeking truth in reporting, very